from my own knowledge. And one of the great leaders of CDC was a gentleman called Dr. Langmuir, who trained people like myself to be disease detectives, to learn how to go out into the community where there was a problem and find out the cause of the problem and put a stop to it, which is not easy to do. I knew him. He was very kindly to me. He visited Mom and I when we lived in London.
He was like your teacher, like.
Yes, more than a teacher, he was a mentor.
Right.
And he passed away
On the wall.
about 20 years ago. And recently, I was asked to write a memoir about him. So I did that. And I did it with love because I had great affection
It's on the wall, tell
for
her.
him.
It's on the wall. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
And it was published about 4 weeks ago. And I've gotten many letters from people of my age who also knew him very well. And they say, yes, you captured all his qualities very well. He was a complex man. Oftentimes he was very difficult to work with because he had high quality. He would demand a lot of you.
He was a Harvard graduate.
Yes. And he knew what he wanted, and he demanded excellence from you.
But he had a twinkle in his eye. At least when I saw him. You know, he was very gracious. Some of these men who put on such a show, you know, are really very tender and soft inside. And whenever he would see me, knowing that I was my dad's wife, and I'd have my 3 kids with me walking down the hall, he always had a twinkle and a smile for me.
Yeah.
You know.
He was a wonderful man.
He visited us in London too,
Yeah.
at our apartment.
And
Which
during
was an
my
honor. It was an honor. It was an honor.
during my years
An
at
honor is-
CDC, I met 3 Nobel laureates in medicine. Do you know about the Nobel Awards? They're,
Yes, Prince Nobel. Prince Nobel.
Yeah.
they're the highest awards you can win anywhere in the world for important accomplishments to mankind. And each year, 1 or 2 people are given the award. And I was fortunate to become friends with 3 of these individuals.
Were they all in medicine?
Yeah, all in medicine. And one of them became a close friend.
Dr. Weller.
Thomas Weller from Harvard University. So it wasn't
It's really the top notch
that I had any
university.
of these qualities. He had the qualities. But the fact that I was at CDC and I had an important job at CDC that created the friendship. I know I'm talking a lot, but I want to tell you about one more individual. I was very fortunate in the teachers, the individuals who were mentors or teachers to me. I had 6 different individuals that taught me a great deal. One of them was Professor Meir Yoeli, a Jewish man from Lithuania who was involved in World War II. He was a colonel in the British Army. He fought in the Battle of Tobruk, famous battle in North Africa. And then eventually came to New York universities and did research on malaria, an important disease. And he was interested in medical history. He wrote beautiful articles on medical history. And I have an interest in medical history. I write quite a few articles for good medical journals. And so we were drawn together by that. And we had a very close, he was older than I, but he was like an older
He was like a father.
to me. Yeah.
Shortly after you
And then-
lost your father.
Suddenly he passed away of a heart attack. And the family asked me to come to New York and give the eulogy at his funeral. A eulogy.
Hello? כן, שלום. נכון, כן, הרמה. Okay.
Tati, maybe do it now.
Is it one of the fathers?
It's the van who needs to take us, the driver of the van.
לא, זה בסדר, אוקיי.
Tati, maybe do it a little bit later. a little bit.
10:20 זה בסדר.
או 10:30 תתי.
אוקיי,
What'd they say?
He's laying in
20 after 10, so now,
בסדר, כן.
now what time is now?
אוקיי, תודה רבה.
Now,
Is
it's
this
gonna be
the-
like an half hour.
In about half an hour, the taxi's gonna, we bought it.
Half an hour.
About half an hour.
What a shame. Okay.
Yeah. But we have tomorrow because we
We
have
could do
a,
this all night. You're learning about Grandpa. I didn't know that Mama talked about it.
I had only 24 hours.
Now you know why Mommy
I learned of his
was who
death
she was, because
till I had
we,
to
we were a very
In New
productive
York.
family.
at the synagogue to give his eulogy. And I sat at my desk and wrote out my thoughts. And it's hard for me to describe, but it was like an inspiration that wasn't anything normal for me. It was something much better than I had ever done before, because my love for him and my knowledge of him. So I got up on the pulpit and spoke about him at considerable length in more or less poetic terms. He was a very romantic individual. Loved when he would teach a class to doctors, half the time would be on science and half would be about literature. And he'd mix it together. And the students loved it because most teachers weren't like
It was also one of your few losses at that age, Mike.
Yes, I never.
You weren't used to death.
I wasn't used to that.
Right.
Yes. So that's a little bit of I'll tell you about my life.
The softness.
Right.
Who was the second one? You talked about,
The eulogies?
no, you talked about several people in your life. He was one.
Yes. The man who owned the farm that I worked on, Mr. Munson, was a educator
He wasn't a farmer,
of schools. And
but he owned
I
a
was
farm.
a young man. He took me under his arm and guided me and gave me the confidence. Those were very difficult times for me because of the hard work, and I had asthma, which impaired my breathing. And I could have quit at any time. And had I quit, I would have always thought of myself as a quitter, a weak person. But I persevered. And because I did, I got the confidence to do other challenges. And it was a good growing up experience.
And who was the third?
I'm trying to think the proper order. It was Don Luria, my teacher of infectious diseases. Then Dr. Langmuir.
And then in London.
Well, I wouldn't count him as a mentor.
Bruce
Leonard-
Schwart?
Bruce Quat?
Yeah.
Yes, probably so. Yeah.
He was so wonderful.
He was a professor at the London
I mean,
School.
these were all people that came to the house
Yeah.
and
And then there was-
very close friends.
The chief veterinarian of our institution, Dr. James Steele. He was a large man with a great love of life. He would greet you with a bear hug. And when you were on the telephone with him, he would talk for an hour, not for a few minutes.
And if he didn't get Grandpa, he got me.
And he
He wouldn't let me go.
guided me very
He was
well.
so
I was
interesting.
very, very lucky. I don't know if anybody amongst my friends
These were leaders in the
who had
field.
so many good mentors
Yeah.
in their lives. And it's important in a professional life, because there are always challenges in being able to do what you want to do, to have other people support you and say, yes, he's the right man for the job. And he passed away 2 years ago, and the family asked me to give the eulogy at his funeral, which I did, and I felt that I said the right words. It's very hard for any one person who's lived a full life to put their life into a few words.
You did a great job.
Pardon?
You did a great job.
Okay. The other thing I take pleasure in doing is writing about people who are no longer with us, but for one reason or another, did great discoveries in medicine. And I have a column in CDC's journal called the Photo Quiz. And I show a photo of the person, and I say, here are 5 names. Which of these 5 is the right one? And I tell what their main accomplishment is. And then I instruct the reader to turn the page, and then I have a biography of that person. And I enjoy putting these together. It's like a craft. If you know sewing, you have to know how to sew properly. For writing, there's a certain way of going about it.
Do this.
And it
Have it on
gives
video.
people pleasure to read the articles.
Here you are.
I'll tell you one more story. You tell me when we have to quit.
Yeah, after this, we have to just say the grace after meals, and then we have to
Oh,
clean
yes.
up.
So, go ahead. And please go ahead.
Yeah, it's okay, okay. Yeah. Need some microphone and.
Should not forget the story, you should say ask them out.
Well, later, after this,
Yeah, maybe we'll finish praying and then read the story and then we'll. Because we don't want to leave.
To hear from the journal whether they've accepted
Grandpa.
what I wrote about it.
Was getting an award. One time, a big award.
It's
Oh, let
a
me
woman
finish.
by the name of Sandy Ford, who came to CDC looking for a job in 1979. And I was one of the people who interviewed her. And she liked the job that we were offering. And I was very impressed with her. And I told her at the time, I think you're much too smart for the level of job that's being offered. It was a clerical job, fairly low level. But she wanted the job, so I hired her. And she fit into our group very well, a good worker, a hard worker.
And she took on things that you had been doing.
Yes, I started
He developed a
a
program.
service to give difficult to obtain drugs that were not in the United States, but were available in Europe. I brought them to the United States, wrote all the material to get licenses for them from FDA, so that if a person had a rare tropical disease, they could be given this drug. And it saved a lot of lives in doing that.
And a certain pneumonia too.
Yes, and one of the drugs was called pentamidine for an unusual form of pneumonia called pneumocystis pneumonia. And it turned out that there was quite a bit of demand, and she spent a fair amount of time satisfying doctors to give the drug to their patients. And she took great pleasure in knowing that she was helping people. And the people who needed this were infants and young children who were the typical ones that developed this pneumonia. Then in the summer of 1981, the number of requests for this drug increased, and the patients that needed it were not the same kind. They were older male patients, homosexual patients.
Single men, single.
Single men. Well, excuse me, we didn't know that right away. She came to me with this information that, look, there's a different quality of requests than usual. And my response was, well, I think somebody's made a mistake. I can't believe that this is true, because it shouldn't be happening.
It had never happened before.
Right. And this is true through history. When a new discovery is made, the usual response is denial. That can't be true. So I instructed her to go back and find out more about the patients.
And this is what epidemiology is all about.
Yeah. It's disease detection, finding out all the risk factors.
A profile.
Yes. And she did that, and she found that they had a different sexual preference than normal men. And she wrote a memo to me saying how unusual this is. And I sent the memo to my boss, who sent it to the director of CDC. And it turned out to be an historic event because it was the first recognition of the AIDS epidemic. And this was how it was recognized within CDC by the smart woman paying attention to the data she was handling.
But I'm going to say, had you not started the drug service, she
Yeah,
wouldn't have been there, and
wouldn't
it
have
would never have happened.
In fact,
Because this was his idea.
when I started it, my boss, Dr. Langmuir, didn't approve of my doing it because he wanted me to be doing a pure epidemiology, not a service. But afterwards, he complimented me for doing it because it took part in a historic discovery.
And many people say to me, Mike and his contribution to
Oh.
CDC, and I'm sure that this is part of it.
Well, that's not part of the story. So we made a important discovery, and within a few months, there was a conference held at CDC on this new disease, and all the young doctors who had worked on it gave presentations of their work and all the different things they had investigated. And Sandy Ford was in the audience, sitting towards the back of the room. And I went to the microphone and I said, "Excuse me, wait a minute. You haven't identified the true heroine of this event." And that's, I pointed to it, Sandy Ford, and I described what she had done. So I didn't know it at the time, but there was a reporter from the American Medical Association there, and he wrote a story about her. And then there was a famous book written a year later called The Band Played On. It became a classic book, and she is described at some length in that book. And the author said, in this room, in this particular day, Sandy Ford informed the world that this new disease was occurring. So we were all very proud of her. And she wore her distinction very well. She was humble. She stayed at CDC for 30 more years, worked well. And she passed away a few months ago. And a friend of mine, Dr. Block, and I felt compelled to write about her because a whole generation had gone by and people didn't know about her. Even the AIDS experts didn't know about her. So we wrote a memorial about her for the CDC Journal. And the subtitle was Heroine of the AIDS Epidemic. And it's a lovely story of an unknown person being. I use a quote from Charles Pasteur. Do you know who Charles Pasteur is? Pasteur was a famous French scientist. He discovered the bacteriology of milk sanitation, water sanitation, and rabies. And around the world there are now Pasteur institutes in many places. When he was alive, he was given an award.
There we go. They've got to go, honey.
Yeah.
No, it's maybe.
But maybe that's your fault.
Oh, it's in
The husbands are calling.
Dad, we could go on for years,
Yeah.
but
Let me just finish.
unfortunately,
When he came off the stage, a friend said to him, "Aren't you lucky?" And Pasteur said, "Yes, but chance favors the prepared mind." And that became a famous quote, and I applied it to Sandy Ford. She had a prepared mind.
Right, but she also took over what you had built and the men that you worked for you
Yeah.
had built. For years, Grandpa was going, and I was in the car, to the airport delivering packages to be sent to the doctors throughout the United States because their patients were dying, and this was a drug that would save them, perhaps, for the pneumonias. And he doesn't want any credit for any of the lead-up work.
No, I don't, because I was being paid.
But she was giving you credit, and you wouldn't take it. She would say, "But Mike, you deserve this." And
Yes.
he gave her all the credit, and
She went
which wasn't
beyond
right, because there were men
what
under him
expected.
that also worked like her before she came along.
Dad, I think we should end this
And
up.
they should be
Okay.
given
It's
some
10
credit.
to 18 and he's
That bothers me a little
It's
bit.
been a great evening. Where was that last
It was an
call
infection
from?
of,
I think it was my daughter's uncle, but he said we should be down at 8:10, 20.
I don't know about stress, I don't think, I'm not sure if there's a connection.